You hate government, one of them libertarian types, or maybe you just can't stand the president, gun grabbers, or warmongers. Me too. That's why I invented LibertyStickers.com. Well, Rick owns it now, and I didn't make up all of them, but still, if you're driving around and want to tell everyone else how wrong their politics are, there's only one place to go. LibertyStickers.com has got your bumper covered. Left, right, libertarian, empire, police, state, founders quotes, central banking. Yes, bumper stickers about central banking. Lots of them. And, well, everything that matters. LibertyStickers.com. Everyone else's stickers suck. All right, guys, welcome back. It's my show, The Scott Horton Show. First up today is Charlotte Silver, writing at Electronic Intifada, electronicintifada.net. That is, this one is titled, Israeli Court Refuses to Let Dying Hunger Striker Go. Welcome back to the show, Charlotte. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
I'm real good. Appreciate you joining us here today. Please tell us all about Mohammed al-Qiq?
Al-Qiq.
Al-Qiq.
Yeah. Right. So Mohammed is a 33-year-old journalist from the West Bank. He's from the Hebron area, but he's been living in Ramallah, and he is the father of 2 children. And he was arrested last November in the middle of the night from his home. And Israeli soldiers sort of immediately started interrogating him, and according to his lawyers, interrogating him and torturing him, holding him in stress positions for full days, up to 18 hours a day, threatening him. And they were, according to his wife and his lawyer, asking him, trying to get him to confess to participating in media incitement, which he refused to do. After about 4 days of this treatment, he began his hunger strike. It wasn't until 3 weeks later that he was placed under administrative detention. And administrative detention, as you probably know, is Israel's widespread practice that's been used increasingly over the last few months since violence escalated in October. It's a practice of detaining Palestinians with no charge, no trial, and based on secret evidence. And so often it's used supposedly to prevent crimes. So Israeli security forces will allege that that the person that they're detaining hasn't committed a crime, but is about to commit a crime. Frequently these crimes that they allege are really based on such flimsy evidence that they wouldn't even stand up in a military court, which has far lower standards than civilian courts. And in the case of Mohammed al-Qiq, the military court itself refused to allow charges to go forward against him, and that's why he was placed under administrative detention. 85 days later, he's been on hunger strike. He's consumed nothing but water for 85 days, and he could die at any moment. And they've said that for weeks, for at least 2 weeks now. So it's quite serious, and Israel's Supreme Court has continued to refuse to meet his demand, which is to be released to a hospital in the West Bank.
All right. And, I'm sorry. Go ahead.
It's telling that the Supreme Court has, in its latest ruling, which again refused to meet his demand to release him to the West Bank, they said that there is evidence, again, this is secret evidence, but that they are sort of relaying to the press that is sufficient to prove that he is undeniably involved in some sort of terror in activities with Hamas. But this is the Supreme Court saying this even after the military court said that there wasn't sufficient evidence to charge him, to try him. So it seems like the Supreme Court is sort of the last bastion of Israel's military security establishment to maintain its practice of administrative detention, which has been roundly condemned by, not just human rights groups like Human Rights Watch, Amnesty International, but even in the State Department has indicated that administrative detention denies due process, and it should be curbed.
Right. Of course, it goes without saying, although it shouldn't. We need to be reminded of this all the time. The Constitution that created our government forbids our government from doing anything like this. The closest they can get away with is calling someone a witness that they need to protect, but even that can last for only a very short time. And we saw that abused right after September 11th, but then the courts put a pretty quick end to it, I think. Well, I don't know. I don't want to overstate that, but at least the Justice Department backed off their chargeless rounding up of Muslims before it got too bad out of control. I'm not trying to spin for Bush Jr. here, but just compared to Israel, where this is the law of the land. This is what they get to do. The cops can grab and arrest people. And you're saying, in this case, the military court said, we don't see enough evidence to hold him, let him go. So they said, okay, well, forget military jurisdiction or the court's jurisdiction. We'll just do administrative detention. So does that mean that it's the Shin Bet cops separate from the IDF that are holding him? Is that how that works? Or
well,
this is minutiae. I'm sorry, it's not really important.
No, well, the military court actually is the one that ordered him to be placed under administrative detention. So the military court said we don't want to prosecute him and try him. And but they were the same ones that said, but go ahead and hold him anyway. Exactly. I mean, the military court isn't upholding any kind of higher rule of law than the Shin Bet. But it's just important to emphasize that the hunger strikes in Palestine are almost always conducted by people being held under administrative detention, because it is literally the only recourse for someone to take against their detention. I mean, the Israeli military court system doesn't provide much judicial process for Palestinian defendants. The majority are plea cases, and the standards of evidence are to convict are very low. However, they at least present evidence against a defendant, and the defendant has a chance, if they wish to fight it, to contest that evidence. With administrative detention, there is no evidence presented. Sometimes there's vague references to the nature of the concern about the defendant. And in this case, there has been rare sort of references to why the so-called security establishment wants to keep Mohammed al-Qiq detained. But for the most part, people, it's truly arbitrary. It is, if you think about it, you're being arrested and you're being held, and you're not being told what evidence is against you and why you're being held. There's nothing you can do to fight it. And that's why you see time and again Palestinians taking up a hunger strike to protest it, because what else can they do? Right. Well, and the thing of it is, we just have to think about this story for a minute, and we'll get back into more of the details on the other side of this break. But for the audience, just think for a moment if this was how the Chinese were treating the Uyghurs, right? Or if this was what Iran was doing to the Iranian Kurds or the Iranian Azeris or some minority in their country. This would be absolutely condemned. It would be, our State Department would be putting out press releases all day long. And you could probably find a good part of the defense establishment in D.C. trying to figure out how we could get a regime change based on this kind of lawlessness, or, ramping up of sanctions or some kind of punishment. Our government would be, I'm not saying it's because they care. I'm just saying if they have a country that they're an adversary of, if Vladimir Putin was doing this, there would be, they would never stop screaming. There'd be absolute hell to pay. This is the definition of tyranny. Being arrested on secret evidence and held indefinitely for pre-crimes where even your accusers accuse you of thinking about doing something, not even necessarily, conspiring to do something, but
They say planning, but they never have to prove it. And this is absolutely crazy. And then, when we get back, we'll talk a little bit more, as you do in the article, Charlotte, about, they're coming for people in the middle of the night, just like the scare stories, the true scare stories about the Nazis and the Soviet communists back in the days of 20th century totalitarianism. And that's how the people of the West Bank live. And the Americans need to know. Right back. Hey, I'll check out the audiobook of Lou Rockwell's Fascism versus Capitalism, narrated by me, Scott Horton, at audible.com. It's a great collection of his essays and speeches on the important tradition of liberty. From medieval history to the Ron Paul Revolution, Rockwell blasts our statist enemies, profiles our greatest libertarian heroes, and prescribes the path forward in the battle against Leviathan. Fascism versus Capitalism by Lou Rockwell for audiobook. Find it at Audible, Amazon, iTunes, or just click in the right margin of my website at scotthorton.org. Hey, all, Scott here. The thing is, I need you guys to help me to get these download numbers up. So do me a favor and sign up for the podcast feeds of this show. You can choose the whole show or just the interviews at iTunes and Stitcher. All the buttons you need are at the top of the right margin at scotthorton.org. The more subscribers I have, the more iTunes and Stitcher will help promote the show to new listeners. If you're a hardcore fan, brand new or from way back, please leave them customer ratings and reviews, too. Trying to get these wars ended. All right, y'all, welcome back to the show. I'm Scott Horton. It's my show, The Scott Horton Show. Talking with Charlotte Silver about, I guess, as far as we know, he's still alive. This guy, Mohammed al-Qiq, 85 days into a hunger strike here. And read the article at electronicintifada.net. Israeli court refuses to let dying hunger striker go. And Charlotte, you saying here that on the 4th, they suspended his administrative detention. Mm-hmm. But so now the question is just which hospital he can go in. They're still controlling his every move and say he can only go to the hospital that they say, even though he has officially been released. Is that right? Mm-hmm.
Not quite. He hasn't been officially released. The order on February 4th, which suspended his administrative detention, it suspended his administrative detention on the basis that he was so weak he no longer posed a threat. So the idea was that once he recovered to some extent, he could be placed under administrative detention again. And that's exactly why they then in the article I wrote a couple of days ago, they said they ruled again that they refused to release him to a West Bank hospital because they didn't want to have to deploy military force to arrest him again.
I see. They want to keep him in their hospital so that once he recovers, they can rearrest him there without a problem.
Right. In these phantom borders that Israel supposedly has. The al-Maqasid hospital in East Jerusalem, it's a Palestinian hospital, and that's where the Supreme Court said he would be allowed to go to, has been raided multiple times, is extremely vulnerable to Israeli police raids, and patients are vulnerable to arrest. So it makes perfect sense that al-Qiq wouldn't feel like he was under any less risk of arrest being moved there, transferred there in East Jerusalem versus where he's being held now in the north of Israel. But it's also important to note that West Bank hospitals are also routinely raided. They aren't protected from Israeli militarism either.
Yeah. Man, this is just crazy. And now, so we hardly ever hear about this, but is this a thing that happens very often, that Palestinian prisoners do these hunger strikes?
Well, it is actually very common. There are about 4 Palestinians currently hunger striking. Al-Qiq has gotten the most attention, and it's hard to say why he has gotten the most attention. He's definitely conducting an absolute strike, and this is from multiple sources close to him in the hospital and his family, that he has not consumed anything but water, and he has also refused all treatment. And so his actual condition is mostly what reports on his condition are mostly speculation, because he's refused any Israeli doctors from conducting any kind of examinations other than just observing him. And so most recently, it was suspected that he may have had a heart attack, and because of the fact that he was in severe pain, but also different parts of his body had sort of changed color. But they can't verify that. And so, what we know about his health is that he may, even at this point, even if the Supreme Court were to rule in his favor, and the Supreme Court is the last option for him, even if it were to reverse its previous rulings, the chances of his recovery are very small, and he may not survive even once treatment were to begin.
Yeah. Now, I guess just to help us understand, why this level of desperation, obviously, you explain there with being arrested with, on secret evidence and no charges and held in this administrative detention in a way that we never tolerate in America, except for, Padilla and Almari. But otherwise, we'd never tolerate that kind of thing around here. But if someone is abducted by the Israelis and held in administrative detention like this, how long does that captivity typically last? Is it all over the place, or is it typically a very long time or a short time?
The maximum administrative detention order is 6 months. So Palestinians can be placed under administrative detention for anywhere between, 1 to 6 months, but that can be renewed indefinitely. And so there are Palestinian prisoners who've been held under administrative detention for years. And then some aren't. So it is all over the place. And for someone like Mohammed al-Qiq, there's no reason to think that it wouldn't be renewed after 6 months. I mean, and all the language around administrative detention is really, it sort of reveals how meaningless it really is. Okay, so you're saying that right now the Supreme Court is asserting that without a doubt Mohammed is involved in terrorism activities with Hamas. So is the idea that, but they're also saying he can be released May 1st. About 2 weeks ago, they tried to get him to agree to end his hunger strike if they promised to release him on May 1st. So what happens on May 1st? He just magically stops being a threat, even though they're saying that there's evidence that he was involved in planning activities with Hamas. It doesn't really make sense. And that's, and this is always in these cases. It never makes sense. Security never really is a reasonable justification for this practice, which is used. Right now, there are 660 Palestinians being held, approximately 660 Palestinians being held under administrative detention. And even Israel's former public security minister in 2012, after a mass hunger strike in Israeli prisons among Palestinian prisoners, this former public security minister said himself, we use this more than we need to, and we probably shouldn't. And
self-licking ice cream cone, just like any other government program, right? Well, we have our administrative detention procedures really fine-tuned now. We'd hate to stop using them so much. But yeah, I would just try to ask the listeners again, try to imagine what kind of situation you would have to be in where you decide you're going to certainly risk suicide by starvation. What kind of position would you have to be in to say, you know what? I mean, this is the only thing I can do to try to get anybody to pay enough attention, to care at all, to do anything about it. With your one life that you got on this earth, that's what you're going to do, is starve yourself to death. That's the position the Israelis have put these people in. That's the point.
Right. But I also think it's important to place the responsibility of his death on this Israel Supreme Court, on Israel's military, on Israel's Attorney General, who's fighting to keep him under administrative detention. I mean, these are the people who are holding this practice. Yes,
absolutely. Yeah. No. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to deflect from their responsibility. I'm just saying that's when people hunger strike, it's because it's that bad. That's why.
Mm-hmm. And even the Israel Supreme Court has placed the blame on al-Qiq if he dies. they've said, you've brought this on yourself, in those exact words. And I think that, Israel's Supreme Court is bolstered by the fact that for the last several months, Israel's killed around 130 Palestinians, most of which are suspected of wanting to commit an attack. Israel's security establishment has completely legalized and paved the road to kill Palestinians to prevent a crime in the future, and that's essentially what the Supreme Court is participating in with its rulings against Mohammed al-Qiq.
And now you're saying that they've ruled that it's okay to kill Palestinians, not in immediate proportional self-defense out in the field, but it's okay to kill them for pre-crimes, just as the same as it is to abduct them for pre-crimes like this?
No, I'm not saying the Supreme Court has ruled that.
I'm sorry, I misunderstood you.
No, I'm not. I'm just referring to the over 130 Palestinians who've been shot dead since October.
Oh, but in those cases, they always at least claim, but she had a knife or that kind of thing. Mm-hmm. Yeah, whether they really did or not is mostly besides the point, I guess. All right, well, listen, I really appreciate you coming back on the show. It's very important work that you do covering these stories, Charlotte.
Thank you so much, Scott.
All right, so that is Charlotte Silver. She's at Electronic Intifada. With this one, Israeli court refuses to let dying hunger striker go. We'll be right back. Hey, Scott Horton here. It's always safe to say that one should keep at least some of your savings in precious metals as a hedge against inflation. And if this economy ever does heat back up and the banks start expanding credit, rising prices could make metals a very profitable bet. Since 1977, Robertson Roberts Brokerage Inc. has been helping people buy and sell gold, silver, platinum, and palladium, and they do it well. They're fast, reliable, and trusted for more than 35 years. And they take Bitcoin. Call Robertson Roberts at 1-800-874-9760 or stop by rrbi.co. This part of the Scott Horton Show is sponsored by Audible.com. And right now, if you go to audibletrial.com/Scott Horton Show, you can get your first audiobook for free. Of course, I'm recommending Michael Swanson's book, The War State, The Cold War Origins of the Military-Industrial Complex and the Power Elite. Maybe you've already bought The War State in paperback, but you just can't find the time to read it. Well, now you can listen while you're out marching around. Get the free audiobook of The War State by Michael Swanson, produced by Listen and Think Audio at audibletrial.com/Scott Horton Show. Hey, Scott Horton here for Liberty.me, the great libertarian social network. They've got all the social media bells and whistles. Plus, you get your own publishing site, and there are classes, shows, books, and resources of all kinds. And I host 2 shows on Liberty.me. Eye on the Empire with Liberty.me's Chief Liberty Officer Jeffrey Tucker every other Tuesday, and The Future of Freedom with FFF founder and president Jacob Hornberger every Thursday night, both at 8 Eastern. When you sign up, add me as a friend on there. ScottHorton.Liberty.me. Be free. Liberty.me.